It was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie. Please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. Welcome. Today, we're going to tackle a very complicated subject. And first, let me stress that we're not a political vodcast, and we are not supporting these particular ideas nor any other political peace proposals. But as always, we're willing to listen. We're always interested in people working on peace. And the Anahnu, or Together Movement for New Israeli Unity's proposal is trying to put an end to this conflict. Amen. We thought it would be thought-provoking to speak with Israel Piekarsh, the co-founder and CEO of this dedicated organization. The group is filled with educated and experienced leaders who believe they have solved this complex puzzle that ultimately can lead to a peaceful resolution between Israelis and Palestinians. They're like a think tank who searched all of the issues, compared them against other proven peace models, looked at Israel's unique disputes, and then came up with these ideas of how to resolve them. They acknowledge this plan of theirs will take time, perhaps a decade, dedication, others who believe in, of course, money to support their ideas. I'll give you a hint of what they're thinking. Their ideas fit into a 100-page report. They call their proposal the Equal Partners Program and say it is based on a win-win principle. All political groups within Israel will be strengthened together, as well as the state of Israel and the Palestinians, without any side leaving its fate in the hands of the other. They call for the establishment of a separate Palestinian state within the 1967 borders with a safe Jewish minority, alongside the establishment of a federal Jewish and democratic constitution in Israel with an enlarged and equal Palestinian minority. Their federal approach recommends the forming of non-territorial civic communities which would provide religious and cultural services in Israel. Sounds complicated, right? Well, of course it is. We're talking about Israel, and they've struggled to give peace a chance for years. We'll be having Israel, their co-founder and CEO, take us through what we would like to institute in detail. I'm not certain that it's possible to get through all of this complicated proposal in our allotted time today, but we'll see. And there's also a film they have available to look at, and we can post the link later if you're interested when we post the recording. So without further delay, welcome, Israel.
Hello. Good morning. So
Good
nice to be here
morning.
with you.
Great to have you. When and why did you help co-found Anahnu?
Well, it's a mystery question. I'm not sure I have a clear answer for that. I do know that in the last 10 years, I had a journey of changing. I was born in the religious Zionist community in Israel, and I'm still part of it today. I live in Efrat, which is a settlement in Gush Etzion. And during those last 10 years, I started to view Israel differently. In 2005, even before that, I was a soldier in the IDF forces. And during that time, the Israeli government started to initiate the disengagement plan from Gaza. And when I saw as a soldier the reality, the facts on the ground, from one hand, those beautiful villages that they had in the Gaza Strip, and from the other hand, the occupation and the suffering of the Palestinian people, I started to realize that both right and left in Israel are choosing those facts which are comfortable for them and ignoring the total summary of reality, those facts that they don't feel comfortable with. And this shocked me and started, in my own eyes, I started to have this process where I tried to figure out Israel from a new way. And I took an oath for myself to view the situation from both perspectives, right and left, and try to understand each problem that our country has from different angles. So this path continued, and I studied at the Hebrew University. I studied international relations, and I studied a lot about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and also about the Israeli constitution and the inner problem, the civilian inner problem of our society. And during those years, when I spoke with so many young kids and officers for the future from the IDF forces, as part of my work, educational work about leadership, I started to realize that we have a problem. I'm not sure that today I have 3 kids. I'm not sure where we are going, what will be their future in our society. We are a divided society with so many big strategic disputes and problems, and we have no idea how to solve them. So me and my partner, Rabbi Aviad Shmina, decided that we have to start thinking about solutions. I had enough with dialogue. I made so many of them. I love them. I still do that, dialogue between different groups of Israeli society. But I got to this conclusion that we have to start thinking about solutions. And these solutions must come from an honest place of searching the truth from different angles of the problem, both right and left, Jews and Arabs. This is how we got started. We started to work, and as you say, we created this think tank at the beginning of 2016, something like that. And we had this amazing journey till we reach our vision about how to create Israel as a better place. So why am I doing this change and this unbelievable path that I had? I think I'm concerned about the future of my children, my neighbors, Palestinian children, and I want us to have a better place. And we have to start thinking about solutions. Enough with dialogues, we need solutions.
One strong, disturbing comment you've made before is that you don't believe Israeli society can last. What do you mean by that?
Israel, unlike almost all other democracies, doesn't have a constitution, sustainable borders, and we live in deep-rooted, divided society on a tiny area, geographically speaking. And this combination of problems bring us into a place where I'm not so sure that we can last for decades now. If we see, for example, in Israeli politics, we can see that the center of Israeli politics is collapsing if we try to measure the combination of both big parties in Israeli parliament. So ever since something like 1984, we can start seeing this path of going down, and other parties, smaller parties, which have these strong disputes about the way that Israel is supposed to be, are rising. So this is in terms of numbers in Israeli politics. In terms of other things, for example, the Israeli parliament, ever since 1996, cannot replace the government without going to general elections. There are only one way to do Israeli coalition. And this is why we had this enormous political crisis in the last 2 years, and only solved 6 months ago. So Israel has strong problems of unable to solve disputes. And if we're trying to think, if I try to think, how can Israel hold it together against this strong pressure, both from international community or the Arab world, or Iran, or even inner issues, disputes between religious and secular civilians of Israel, Jews and Arabs inside of the country. I have a strong concern that today, without solution, without a new constitution, without Israeli-Palestinian peace, a new political and security doctrine to solve problems, this is not going to last. Or at least we're going to have a problem for not be able to have this joint consensus.
Well, you've worked for all these years doing research and meeting people to develop your principles for your proposal. I'm going to pull up some pictures that you provided, and we'll talk about the Anahnu members and some of the meetings you've had and some of the things you found out. So let me share my screen. So here are some members. You want to talk about these pictures?
Well, to make it a long story short, these two pictures are from a gathering that we have among several people. Some of them are members of our movement. Some of them just joined to hear about our ideals. The image of us standing inside the room with the sign is one of the meetings that we had to think about our vision, to talk together. The people who were part of this meeting are coming from different places of the Israeli society. And we had this good conversation about how we want to change things regarding, specifically in that meeting, regarding the Haredi society. How do we think we need to solve it differently? The other meeting with the flags are taking, this is actually from a tour in a village, a Druze village in Israel called Osofia, where we wanted to talk about the issue of our Arab and other minorities, Druze minorities inside of Israel. You know, the Druze community, they're serving the Israeli defense forces. They're part of our society. They are equal civilians, but they're suffering from discrimination and many inner problems in their villages. And
that's the Druze, you're saying, correct?
Yeah, the Druze, correct. And we wanted to think, how can we change conception about discrimination in Israel and to solve those problems between them and the country and inside of their society. So we had this tour, which was amazing. We found many great partners among the villages, and it was a wonderful tour. It was our first tour of the movement.
Oh, cool.
Right before the corona, before the pandemic.
Oh, well, here you're meeting with an important person from the PLO. Can you talk about what this was about?
He's a minister in the PLO in Madani. He's responsible for the interaction with Israeli society, civil society in Israel. And actually, this is a very unique picture. Me, as a settler, who's fighting against occupation, but also believe that settlements need to stay on the ground as part of a Palestinian state with equal partnership as civilian in Palestinian state. I believe that this picture is very unique. because El-Madani usually doesn't take pictures with settlers. But what he heard from us made him think that this is a different case. This is why I have hope that our ideals can make a difference. When we met with him, I spoke with him about mutual pardon, about our vision to create this two-state and two communities solution. And he found it comfortable at the end of the meeting to take this picture. We believe today, we believe today that we, as the Jewish people in Israel, we must do the first step. And this was a great thing for me to take this picture because it gave me the motivation that if we will take the first step, if we will bring new solutions to the table, then the Palestinians will feel comfortable to take the second step. So this is what this picture symbolized for me.
Wonderful. And here you're at the Institute for National Security. What was going on there? You have two different times, I believe, that you visited them.
As part of our journey, we met with many scholars, experts in their fields, from legal, security, social perspective of Israeli society. And this was one of those points where we explained about our vision. We had two different lectures in the Israeli National Security Institution, and we try to summarize our perspective, and we had a lot of comments. Some of them were supportive, some of them were not, and it was a good thing. It was part of our journey to get all these comments from many people, scholars, civilians, so many different ways to measure and understand what we want to do. So this was a very important milestone that we had.
Wonderful. And here you lecture throughout Israel, and here's just some of your lectures. Can you talk a little bit about what you did at these different schools?
Yeah, well, generally speaking, what we're trying to do is either to persuade people that our vision has a lot of potential, it can change things. If we will do the first step with the Jewish people, we do the first step. So many times we're meeting with people, some of them are students, some of them are older, and we try to explain, to make them support, be part of our movement and part of our ideals. Sometimes we're only gathering together without political perspective, only to try to explain our narrative, historic narrative, and ideas of mutual pardon and so forth. So in our lecture, we were doing these two tracks, and what you were viewing is actually these two tracks. You know, the one with this red hole, and
the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
The Hebrew University students. We are talking about our solution, and the other one with all these kids sitting in a circle. We're talking about historic perspective, the conflict, and this is how we work. It's a grassroots work, very difficult. We're determined to do as many as those events as we can in order to persuade Israelis to support our vision.
Fantastic. And here you even meet in people's homes. What is this in Kfar Yona?
Yeah, in Kfar Yona, this is, as I said, we are trying to persuade people to support our vision, which was a very, very good evening that night. And people at the end of these house meetings, either they're signing declaration that they want to give a chance to our vision, or they're donating to our movement, or they're joining. So it depends on their views, how they want to act. But we are offering them in those house meetings to be part of our journey. And
I know in the past. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
In the past, I've talked to you about memberships and so on, and you said that you were just beginning to do that. How's it going?
It's going great. We just finished this long program of developing our vision during the Corona crisis. And in the last few months, we tried to have this pilot of understand how can we act the best way we can. And right now we are gathering our first group of members as part of our movement. And luckily we have 20 new members right now, both from right and left, men and women, from different sides of Israeli Jewish society in Israel. And our plan is to create much bigger movement, hundreds of people, together also Arabs with us, to create these strong alliances, new alliances in Israeli society. And this is how we started. So the pilot was great. We are fully confident in our future and our possibilities.
In your people who did all the studies, how many Jews versus how many Palestinians or Arabs are participating?
It's an important question. When we started, our idea was to create a joint Jewish and Arab movement in Israeli society. But as we move forward, we talk with dozens of our friends that we still have connection with them and they still believe in our vision. They said we are fully supporting our vision, but you, the Jewish people, because you are the strongest side, you have to do the first step. We, the Arabs, doesn't have the ability to change things when we come from a weaker standpoint. So what we understood that we have to start within the Jewish people, from right and left, create a new alliances between different groups inside of the Jewish people, and always search the place where the Arabs can join us. So this is what we are doing right now. We're gathering different groups of Israeli Jewish society to become part of our movement. It's important for us that they will come from right and left. And we are maintaining this contact with the Arab side in order to understand when can they do the second step.
Is it also on their part because it's dangerous for them? I mean, I talk to people all the time on their side who it is dangerous for them to talk of peace with Israelis.
Yes. It's dangerous for them, not only because we're Israelis, specifically because I'm a settler and there are other settlers in the movement.
Right.
And it's difficult for them. When I speak with them behind closed doors, they're fully supporting our vision. And they understand our perspective of mutual pardon, but they cannot go publicly with that. So unfortunately, right now, in the coming years, we're going to have to start with the Jewish people because we have to start from the strong side and we have to start somewhere. After that, we're going to search our way, to gather better political support from the Arab side. Luckily, there is a great potential. Our movies in the Facebook platform, or when we speak with them, or in our tours, we are still doing joint tours. We find that there is a lot of common ground.
Yes. So the last two slides are about tours. So here you're in Gush Etzion, which is, we're talking settlements, yeah?
Yes. This is a picture with an organization called Roots. I think you know them.
I know them very well.
Yes. So they are right next to my house. And luckily, they're great neighbors. And we have these amazing collaboration with them. And this picture we taken was in their complex. And we had this first tour in Gush Etzion. We were calling from occupation to partnership. And we're trying to view the situation in Gush Etzion and in the West Bank generally from different perspectives, both right and left. The connection to the historic land of Israel, our ideal of mutual homeland, joint and shared homeland, our ideal of security. We're talking about security and terrorism and self-defense, and also about occupation and human rights. We are combining it. We are the only movement to combine all these different angles together. And this is what we did the first time when this picture was taken. The other picture is actually in a very
Western Wall.
This is the Western Wall, but unique place of the Western world. It's not the traditional place where everyone are going. It's a new place where men and women can pray together. And this, well, yes, this is a big issue in Israel. It's a big conflict.
Yeah, that wasn't possible when in 2014 when I went.
I don't remember the exact year where they established it, but they still have conflict about it. It's not so easy. Even today, if men and women want to pray, especially in different ways from Jewish Orthodox way, they still have problems to do this. But this was a new platform, and our tool was about viewing the Western world and the entire area of the old city of Jerusalem from different perspectives. So we deal with the Israeli-Palestinian issue in East Jerusalem, and also about the inner Jewish issue between religious, secular, and different groups of religious inside of the Jewish world. So this was the second issue, and my friend has this amazing idea. Let's take a stone, and we'll show that we are trying to create new things as part of the old ways. So connected to this history, this stone, this rock, but we are thinking about the new path and new stages of our nation.
Well, that's exciting. I obviously saw this picture, but I didn't realize that there was even such a place. So yay. Yeah. Next time I visit, I will have to go there. And then you have some interesting trip here to tour to Mount Herzl and Lifta, and please tell us about it.
Yeah, well, these two pictures I think were taken at the Lifta, again before the coronavirus pandemic. The Lifta village is the only village in Israel who is part of the Palestinian villages that were here before 1948 inside of Israel. The village is in the western side of Jerusalem, and this is the only place where still we have some houses left intact, obviously abandoned from 1948, the 1948 war. As we know, the history of this war is divided between those two nations. The Arabs, the Palestinians are talking about the Nakba, the disaster of them being expelled from their homes and cities in Israel. And the Jewish side is talking about the liberation of Israel and the independence of the Jewish people. So in this tool, what we're trying to do, we call it the 1948, the war that didn't end. We try to talk about those two narratives and then try to combine them together in a mutual perspective. We're starting our tour in the Mount Herzl when we're speaking about the Zionist narrative of the war, the idea that we had to defend ourselves from an overall offensive of Palestinians in our world. And then we're talking about in Lifta, about the Palestinian perspective, about how they had to defend themselves from colonialism, from this war trying to take their homes and the villages and lands. And then we are gathering together to speak. How can we change things? How can we adopt new values? Try to bridge enormous gaps between those two narratives. And we are talking about this idea of shared homeland, and injustice cannot justify injustice, and about how we, the Jewish people, must take the first step. And this is, by the way, one of the tools that we are doing combined, is Jews and Arabs together, and this is going very well. It's one of our best tours that we have.
Great. So who financially supports your efforts?
Well, there are two foundations that support us. One of them is the Anahnu Foundation in Israel, and the other one is the Olive Stone Trust. And we are also gather donations from Israelis, Americans, Europeans, as much as we can, that can support our efforts to change those conflicts into better ways, into better solutions. And luckily, we have supports from right and left, and supporters from inside of Israel and overseas. And I think that we're doing very well. We're going to do more.
Like the rest of the world, COVID severely impacted your efforts. How did you have to adjust?
Wow. Actually, the COVID till now was a very good thing for us. It sounds weird, but I don't know what will happen from now in the future, the coming year. But until now, it was a very good thing for us. When we got started, we had this, as I said, big journey. We talked with hundreds of people. Many of them are from the Arab side, and we tried to search our own ideals. We developed these many papers about our vision, and then in 2019 we started to check them in the field. We started to have house meetings, tours, as we saw on the slide. And when COVID arrived, we knew that there are gaps that we have to fill in. We have to take all this experience and ideals and gather them together in one big research, new website, new films, to produce pages for people to view, to understand the problem and the solution. This is what we did. A long year and a half research, writing, and producing our new contact and ideal, and we're just finishing right now. Also, we did a pilot about how to move forward from ideal to practice. And actually, as we speak right now, these are the final days of this very big and large project, which take us into a whole new generation of abilities. And we are very anxious to start, with enthusiasm, to start working and to bring our ideals into practice. This is exactly what we're doing. So
well,
COVID
speaking,
for us was difficult.
Oh, go ahead.
But it was very, very good chance to create new abilities.
You put your time to good use, huh?
Yes.
So overall, we're gonna get into the proposal and the overall Anahnu's vision. What, in just a few sentences, could you describe that?
Yes, I will start with the problem. We understand that all these many problems that we discussed about, from different angles, civilian problems, Israeli Palestinian issue, and so forth, all of them are coming from one simple assumption. The Israeli public model, state model of Israel, is a homogenic one. And Israel is a heterogenic society. And the area is built upon heterogenic societies and nations. And Israel model just doesn't fit the situation on the ground. Now I will explain. Israeli model is the way the states view Israeli society. Is having these two different levels. Either you are a private civilian, because the Jews, Arabs, secular, religious, so forth, that's okay, but you are a private civilian, or you are a part of the Jewish nation. All those different groups inside of Israel, religious, secular, Jews, Arabs, Palestinians, in Israel and outside of Israel, all of them, the state doesn't recognize them as groups. They don't have a joint rights, a joint independence. So for any of them, you can only be part of the Jewish people if you want national rights, or a private civilian with equal rights. But the problem is that we are, in Israel, we are a heterogenic society with different groups. So the clash between the doctrine of the state and the society on the ground is unbelievable. And this is what we're trying to change. We want our model, the equal partners plan, is to create this new equal partnership between the Jewish people and the very different groups inside of Israeli society and the Palestinians. This is, to summarize our plan, this is our goal.
What is the Equal Partners Program?
Well, there are two two platforms that we're trying to change. Number one, in the Israeli-Palestinian issue, we are trying to create this two-state solution with two communities inside of Israel and inside of Palestine. We're talking about creating a path of ending the occupation towards a place where settlers can be part of Palestine with an Israeli citizenship and Palestinian citizenships, obviously, and those Palestinian refugees who are surrounding Israel will have the ability to enter the country as long as the Jewish majority in Israeli state will be 70% of Israeli civil society. By creating simulation between those two groups, settlers inside of Palestine and Palestinian refugees inside of Israel, we believe that we can change and shift the problems that we have till now in the two-state solution. This is number one. One of our foundations. The second thing which we are trying to do is to create a new Israeli constitution by which each group inside of Israeli state will have the ability, independent ability to educate their own pupils, their own young children, boys and girls, and also to create an institution of culture and religions for themselves in an independent and autonomic way. Again, the ideal here is to recognize that every group inside of Israeli society has its own needs. They have their needs, they have their independent needs, and we cannot continue in a way that the states try to educate everyone according to the coalition, the political coalition that we have in those specific years that we're talking about. So these are the two things that we're trying to do. The way we're trying to do it regarding the civilian issue is to create a civil community. Each number of percentage of Israeli society that we need to decide about in the future will have the ability to create this civilian community that will have a budget, institution, small parliament. Sounds similar like you in the US have these states in the federal government. So these are the states, Israeli terms. They will have the ability to work it through specifically regarding religious, cultural, and humanitarian education inside of Israel. These civilian communities will not divide the country into areas, geographically speaking. They will only provide services. Doesn't matter where you live. You can choose who you want to get your services from. By doing that, we believe that we can reunify the Israeli society. We don't have to hold it together in Israeli politics as we are doing now, try to bring these different clashes of people who doesn't agree about everything, try to decide how can we do things with religious or secular Jews and Arabs. We don't have to decide that. Each group will decide for herself, and we'll have this joint ability to create a common politics between all the groups of Israel. So we believe.
I was going to ask you why you believe Israel is splitting apart, and who are the groups causing the split?
Well, there are many groups. Actually, it's very difficult to measure it because each one of us is part of several groups. But if I try to divide, if I take, for example, the speech of the former president of Israel, President Rivlin, who just several months ago finished left his office, he said that there are four groups in Israel: secular, the Zionist religious group, the Haredi groups, and the Arab group. I think there are many more. Yeah. It's not only about them, but these groups have totally, completely different perspective what Israel should be. And as long as we're trying to put them all together in the Israeli parliament to decide what Israel is supposed to be, all we got is disputes. But if we will do like you have in America, a place where every group can decide for herself, and in the joint parliament will work only about other things or will not necessarily force groups to do things against their will, then we can have unified. We can reunify the Israeli society. The current path is impossible.
You're proposing a federal Jewish and democratic constitution. What does that mean?
Well, we have three principles in our vision. Number one is a Jewish democratic state, and this is a place where we want to persuade to maintain the current situation. Israel will have a Jewish majority, and Jewish national symbols, and Jewish dates for holidays and so forth. But Israel will not try to ignore Palestinian identity or other different identities inside of the Jewish people. As I said, secular, Haredi, Zionist religions, Ethiopian, Russians, and so forth. So what we are doing, we have three principles: a Jewish democratic state, two states, two communities regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and equal liberties regarding the Constitution of Israel. And we, as I explained, we believe that if we will bring new liberties to the groups of Israel, not only to the private citizens, then we can have our nation be equal, liberated, and also unified. This is the only way. The current model does not work.
How do you believe the Jewish Israelis versus the Arab Israelis are treated by the government and the society today, and how will this be different?
Short question. It's very difficult. I think that Israel's doctrine towards the Arab minority today is a contradictional one. On the one hand, they have equal rights, full equal rights. Actually, today, historically, they're part of the coalition. They can choose to vote, they can run for parliament, they can be part of the government. They have ministers. And there are also an amazing project of trying to fix equal situation between Jews and Arabs. And this is from one hand. So these are the good news. The bad news is there is the other way, the other hand. There are branches in the Israeli government which have a job to discriminate the Arab people in order for the Jewish people to have more land, and they will have strategic ability to have their villages all around Israel. There is an amazing discrimination in the educational system against Arab identity.
What groups are those?
Groups,
what groups?
Of government.
Actual branches of the government?
Branches of the government, yes. Branches of the government by law. I will give an example. The last, from the national law, the fundamental law in Israel. When we don't have constitution, those fundamental laws are some sort of replacement for constitution. And one of the chapters of the law specifically says that Israel has a goal to create villages for the Jewish people. It's horrible. It's causing so many problems, because if the government tries to build villages only for Jews, as the law said, then it means that the Arabs doesn't have an ability to expand their villages. They are difficult, create an enormous problem to live together, and so forth. And there are branches of government, historically speaking, from the 50s and even before that, from the British mandate, before we had a state, and branches of the Zionist movement, were doing exactly that. This is not the only problem. In educational terms, the Arab educational system in Israel doesn't recognize Palestinian identity, although more than 60% of Palestinians inside of Israel, Israeli civilians, I'm speaking, are feeling that they are Palestinians. And this is part of their story. So the educational system doesn't recognize that. There are no groups inside of the Jewish people in Israel who feel such a strong gap between their identity in their families and their homes and their schools. Another problem is infrastructure problem. But usually when people are talking about discrimination in Israel, they're usually referring to infrastructure problem. For example, there are no, as we speak right now, when there are no train roads in our villages. There are no stations, train in our villages. They are now planning to do one, the first one, ever since Israel was established, in 5 years from now.
So none.
4 or 5 years from now.
So
none,
and
zero.
And how many are in Israel, in Jewish Israeli towns?
Dozens, all over the country, both in center cities, in the villages, the faraway villages. This is only one example. I can give so many other communication roads, the police work. We know that right now our society in Israel is strong criminal problem. There are many people who are getting murdered. Every week, there are 1 to 4 people from the Arab community who got murdered because of conflict inside of the Arab society.
Amongst their own people?
How much totally?
No, amongst their own people, or are we talking within their cities, amongst their...
Inside of families, conflict between different families inside of the Arab world. So it's important for me to say, all these discrimination problems are not the overall picture. The overall picture is contradiction. As I said, on the one hand, equal rights and honest attempt of the government to change things. For example, in police work, there are honest officers who are doing the best they can in order to stop this criminal wave that we're having in the last few years. But on the other hand, there are those branches that are doing exactly the opposite, according to law. So in Israel, we don't have solutions. So we have disputes, and this is going all the way, even in this regarding discrimination of the Arab minority. So putting all this aside, there are also problems inside of the Arab minority in Israel. Historic problems, there is the issue of the Arab minority refusing to accept Israel as a Jewish democratic state, maybe from good reason, maybe not, but still creates an unbelievable gap between them and the Jewish people. You know, the Jewish majority is saying, we want you to have equal rights, we want you to be part of our society, but we cannot accept you as Palestinians. And the Arab minority said, we want you to accept us as Palestinians, and if you're referring to this, then we cannot accept you as a Jewish democratic state, your rights as a majority in the country. And this dispute doesn't give us the ability to change things. So all these historical problems inside of the Arab minority are clashing with this doctrine, this contradictory doctrine of the government. And eventually things are going worse and worse. No, as I refer to, I just talked about the crime in Arab. This is one of the major issues in Israel right now. The crime wave that we are having in the last few years. Maybe 100 people are getting murdered each year inside of the Arab population. In the last year, I think we got in the 120 maybe in 2021 during the Corona crisis. So
by their own people?
Yes, it's a crime. It's a criminal act. There are many reasons for these murders, but it doesn't matter the fact. I think that as long as we have these historical problems inside of our society, which needs to be fixed, there are many partners inside of Arab population who are saying we want to fix those problems. We have a motivation and a will to change it, but we need the help of the government. And the government is working in a contradictional way. So actually nobody is the responsible adult here. You can't force the police to change things if the educational system doesn't work, the urban planning doesn't work, because we want to give more land for Jews. So how do we expect those police officers who are doing the best they can and sometimes risk their lives to hold back the criminal organization in our society if we don't have, like a civilian good path for them, educational, land, infrastructure? So how can we expect the Israeli policemen, women, to hold back the crime? It's impossible. And no one is there responsible adults. All these problems are stemming from a specific point. We have a dispute about the Palestinian identity of the Arab people in Israel. As long as we refuse to recognize Palestinian identity of the Arabs in Israel, and as long as they refuse to recognize the Jewish nationality and Jewish self-determination rights in Israel, we cannot solve all the other problems. And it will become worse and worse. And this is what we're doing. Mutual pardon, two communities, two states, and equal liberties for each group. This will be the solution for that particular problem and many other problems.
You acknowledge the differences among the Jewish communities and you work together to bridge the gap of understanding. How do you work on these divides? There's so many different sects of Jews just among themselves.
We refer to the Jewish people right now, right? If I heard you correctly.
Yes.
All right. Well, actually, I think that we, the Jewish people, and I'm now talking about Jewish people all over the world, we must do this to adopt a new way of thinking. We are not regular to have a sovereign state. Still a new thing for us. In the last 2,000 years, we were all over the world, the diaspora, we didn't have a state. And to have a state, to have a sovereignty, to have the responsibility of government is a new thing. The problem that we are having is that we don't have this common ground, a neutral perspective about our people. What I mean is that we have many disputes, Reform, conservatives, Orthodox, secular.
But you have so many people from all over the world who've come to live there. From the whole world. With different experiences.
This was the point when we, the Jewish people, have to decide what are we doing with all this version of Judaism. And we got it wrong. We did a mistake. The ideal, the melting pot of Israel was to, let's create them all as part of one. Let's ignore the difference. This is how Israel was established in the 50s. Let's ignore the difference. Let's make them all, as I said, private civilians with different cultures or a Jewish nation. But we will ignore their differences as a group. Problem is, if you were adopting this melting pot position, then what we are doing, you are gathering together, you are taking control of the disputes between those groups. You are saying, we, the country, the state, will decide. So you have to decide. You have to gather secularly religious Jews and try to judge what will be the solution for the different disputes that we are having. This is where state and religious combined together, and this was a horrible mistake because there are no governments in the democratic world, especially in it, who can judge what will be the solution for these disputes. If I'm Haredi, I think that to be Jewish is one thing, and if I'm secular, then to be Jewish is a different thing. And what, the government is going to tell me how to live my life? So this attempt by governments to decide how to create religious institutions, how to get married in Israel, how to educate the young people about Judaism and so forth, this is a disaster. It doesn't work ever since the 70s, ever since the 1977 change, in this shift in Israeli politics. We all know that. But nobody till now put new doctrine of Israeli reunification of society. Nobody. So the government, we all know, all Israelis know this melting pot doesn't work, but we're still doing that. Even now, as we speak, the new government of Israel is trying to create to change things regarding the religious institution of Israel. What does it matter? They will change it. We will have a new government in a year from now. Different groups will enter the government, and they will rechange that they did. It's an endless circle. And in the meanwhile, we have this collapse of, for example, Israeli law. I can give many examples. If the law said for Haredi to join the army, they just refused to do it. Like a civilian rebellion. The law also said in many cities in Israel, at the current moment, right now, actually, that in Shabbat, shopping malls and markets in secular cities will be closed. And obviously they're not. So again, a rebellion against the law. And I can give so many examples about it in terms of getting married in Israel, in terms of educational programs. The melting pot collapsed. The only way we can change things is to acknowledge the right of each group, the independent liberal right of each group to decide about our own ways. And in order to do that, we have to adopt a new thing in the Jewish people. We are calling neutral perspective. The state must be neutral. It shouldn't be either secular or religious. It simply needs to be national, the democratic and Jewish state with neutral perspective, about how we're supposed to have our joint lives. It's a new thing because as Jews, we already got used to the idea of having a shul or synagogue or a club where we decide about our way of Jewish lives. But referring to a Jewish state, it shouldn't do that. It should only say, let's create this platform for everyone. Let's work it through together. That for each group, we'll have our own abilities and our own ways. And that's a new thing for us. As a minority all over the world, we always had to choose our own way. We never had to create a platform for several people to be together, several groups of Judaism to be together. And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to fix this historical mistake of the melting pot, to have this new idea of equal liberties for each group in Israel, obviously Jews and Arabs as equal partners. And we want to work it through to have this new perspective by which we have joint platform and each group can decide about her own way.
I think that's just the whole world is dealing with extremes. The U.S. too, everywhere. There, the political views are so extreme, and people being able to live together is just hard to figure out how to make that happen in a peaceful setting, in a way where people could just get along, even though that they have different beliefs.
I completely agree. But the Israel has a different problem, a bigger problem. We are in a tiny area.
Yes.
The people from different groups are living in some few houses, few blocks to one another.
Yes.
And also, we don't have a constitution.
Yeah. So how do you address the fact that Israelis and Palestinians don't even speak the same languages?
Well, it's a difficult issue. We have to find resources, to have translation to Arabic and English and so forth. Many times we just find one of the members or is part of the movement, he or she can translate Try to speak English the best as much as we can. But if someone doesn't understand the language, so someone is translating it for him, or we try to find someone who speaks the language.
In your civic communities that you've talked about to establish, and if there are these communities with their own beliefs taught, if I understand it correctly, how would you prevent extremist rhetoric from being taught, or would you?
No, that's a very good question. If we believe that each group should have their own way and independence, obviously in Israel we will have extreme groups that will try to use this independence to create more extremism. This is a very big challenge for our vision. But I think we have we're developing these new tools to solve it. Number one, we need to understand in the current situation, those extreme groups are very strong. It's not like we are asking how to make them stronger. They're in their strongest position because even though Israel has this law against extremism and for equal rights and so forth, these groups simply do whatever they want, and nobody can force them otherwise because the Israel government is too weak to do that. So the question that we asked ourselves, once we understood that, we understood that in the current situation, those extremism are becoming stronger and stronger as years go by, how can we change things? And what we said is, let's create a new perspective by which the government will give those groups an ability to live their lives, but, this is a huge but, only if they will accept the idea that in a total civilian society, Israel will have equal rights in joint and constitutional ways. And if those minorities inside of these extreme groups will have an ability to decide about their own path. Now I will explain. What we decided is about 4 terms that must occur in order for Israeli government to give those groups an ability, an independent ability to educate their people and to create their ways. Number one, they have to give choice for everyone. They cannot force their way. If I'm a Haredi, if I was born in a Haredi community, then according to our vision, I will have the ability to decide about my own path. And I won't have to be forced by different groups in the Haredi community, what should I study and so forth. I can choose to study on the Torah or the religious studies, that's okay. But they cannot force me not to study academic professional, for example. This is number one. Number two, they cannot force their ways about other people. Every person, every woman, every civilian in Israel can choose only for himself, not for other people. Number three, there will be no slippery slope. Even if I will choose for myself and I will not force others, if there is a phenomenon by which we will fear that extremism will take place will take us too strong positions in Israeli society and will create a change in public sphere, for example, in the idea of faith, right? Let's assume that right now that many religious soldiers will want to have men and women separately in Israeli basis, a phenomenon that we have right now. So what we are doing is saying they can only do it until the level of a platoon. Above that, the battalion, they won't be able to do it because of the slippery slope issue. And so this is the third term. And the last thing is that we want to establish authority that will have the responsibility, will have budget and governmental responsibility to help those people who want to change. So to summarize what we are saying, we want to have a new deal, new civilian deal with many different groups, Muslim, Jewish groups, countries. You will have the ability to live your lives, but you will live the same ability, you will give the same ability to other groups in Israel, to other minorities in Israel, to live their lives as well. You will have to do that. So these are the terms by which we can work it through with those groups. Today, Israel law wants 100%, no extremism. Everyone will be part of an equal rights, lives, and part of modernization. But in some groups, like the Haredi groups, Israel gets 0. They want 100, they are getting 0. In our vision, Israel will leave 70%, for example, to do whatever they want, to have their own lives, but will get 30% as part of Israeli society combined inside of Israeli society. So this is our perspective. To understand the current situation, we are offering a new deal, and we have these new solutions.
Well, always the main thing is having an Israeli state and a Palestinian state. And the fact is that there's Israelis who live in what that territory would be and vice versa. And how that, in our last minutes, how does that work? What are you proposing?
Well, moving to that fundamental idea that we just spoke about our civilian perspective inside of Israel. Regarding the Israeli-Palestinian issue, what we want to do is to have this two-state solution that will work with the interest and will have this perspective of understanding the interests of both sides all over the territory, security, economic, and historically speaking. Both nations have a perspective of the entire country as part of their historic homeland. Israel has security interest inside of Palestinian territory. Palestinians have economic interest inside of Israeli territory. So the two-state solution must acknowledge that. We didn't do that in the 90s. This was one of the biggest problems. So how will it work? If the settlers will live in Palestine, number one, they will have to be Palestinian civilians with equal rights and obligations, alongside their Israeli civilianship. They will have an autonomy, educational autonomy in the West Bank, in the Palestinian state, and in Gaza. And they will also have the ability to be part of Israeli society. As I said, they will have two citizenship. We are living, we are talking about only like a half an hour drive in many cases. Besides of that, we are adopting this principle of no side will put his faith in the hand of the other, as you mentioned in the beginning of our discussion. We believe that we need to adopt this new security doctrine, by which, if I try to summarize the many stages that we're having, the one important thing to remember is that every time when there will be a threat to Israeli lives, and the Palestinian government will not act because it doesn't want or it doesn't have the ability to do that, then Israel security forces will act instead of Palestinian government until the threat will be eliminated, and then they will be brought back. So no side will put his faith in the hand of the other side. Palestinians will have the obligations from the Israeli government to withdraw. They will accept their state, their self-determination right, and Israel will have the ability to combat threats in case where Palestinian government will not do that. Now, I must be honest, there are many problems with this solution. For example, who said the international community will let Israeli forces enter the Palestinian country? From Palestinian perspective, who is saying that Israeli government won't try to find excuses to make occupation going on and on and on forever. There are many problems. But here is the thing that we understood. Both sides have risks. We must not take new risks, but we have to accept those risks that we are forced to accept. In the current situation, nobody can guarantee that Israeli forces will stay in the West Bank. The Trump plan was to take those settlements, to have them under siege of Palestinian state. And I'm saying under siege because it was not accepted by Palestinians. So if we will try to accomplish Trump plan, it means that we should have had a Palestinian state who refused to accept the plan and settlements on the ground surrounded by the sovereignty of the state. We should have these major blocks such as Ma'ale Adumim, Gush Etzion, Ariel, as border towns of this hostile situation. And that plan was supported by the most right-wing government in the last decade in Israel. So it was only a matter of coincidence, of a random circumstance that we weren't forced to accept this plan. This is an example for how unstable the situation is. So I'm saying for my friends, my settler friends, look, the current situation is unstable. Any minute now, my village, a flat, can become a hostile area, can become a village next to the border, with a major threat and hostility, or even worse, under siege. It can happen in a matter of years. So the best way we can move forward as settlers, and also as the Palestinians, is to accept the risk that we are having now, but rejecting new risks. The plan that we are offering can stabilize the situation. I'm also saying there are three scenarios. The optimistic scenario that will have a reconciliation and a better path towards peace. This is the best scenario, the optimistic scenario. The pessimistic scenario is that our plan won't work, and both sides will use the leverage that they have according to the agreement in order to manage the situation. And there is a third scenario, a catastrophic scenario, by which the agreement doesn't work, the leverage are collapsing. You will have like we had in the second Intifada, a major war between the two sides, or like we had a few months ago in the Gaza war, a major clash between sides for 2 weeks. The reason why we prefer our vision on the current situation is not because the catastrophic scenario is impossible. That's not the reason. It is possible. It's because in the current situation, there is no optimistic path, no reconciliation possible. The pessimistic path, where we try to manage the situation, is extremely unstable, and we are already suffering several cases of catastrophic, like we did in the war between Israel and Hamas a few months ago. So in our vision, we have an optimistic path. Optimistic path. The pessimistic path is stable because we have an agreement. And I'm positive that the possibility for a total collapse is lower than the current situation, by which total collapse is actually what we are viewing in the news all the time. So this is why we prefer the risk in our vision on the risk that we are having in the current situation.
Wow. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Perhaps we can talk and we can really get into the whole Israel and Palestinian state issue in detail sometime in the future. But Wow, that was a lot to try and absorb.
Yeah.
And thanks so much, Israel, for sharing your exciting work with Anahnu and how you believe we could finally obtain peace between Israelis and Palestinians, at least eventually. If our audience has questions, and I'm sure you will, I'd propose going to the Anahnu website at anahnu.org.il and check them out. Next week on Tuesday, we're going to be speaking with both Jane Krivine, founder and executive director, and Lee Wilson, managing director of Tennis for All. Jane is the daughter of Freddie Krivine, who was known as Israel's Mr. Tennis. He was one of the 6 founder trustees of the Israel Tennis Centers. One of his passions was to support tennis in the Arab sector by introducing tennis programs into the community. The Freddie Krivine initiative strives to capture the imaginations of kids of all backgrounds and skill levels, bringing together coexistence community of Arab and Jewish kids playing tennis together with the support from Arab and Jewish parents, coaches, players, teachers, and volunteers. We hope you can join us to listen how another, perhaps unexpected avenue is used to work on peace between Israeli and Arab youth. And for now, may you live in peace, shalom, and salam.